Welcome to a deep dive on the foundations of internal auditing.
Absolutely.
We're going to be covering the core principles and standards that really make this field tick.
Yes.
And, you might be thinking internal auditing sounds a little dry,
Right.
but trust us, this stuff is way more fascinating than you'd expect.
It really is.
Oh,
Yeah, these principles and standards aren't just some dusty old rule book.
right.
They're the guiding light for everything internal auditors do.
Okay.
They impact how organizations operate,
Yeah.
how they manage risk, and ultimately how they succeed.
So we've got some great resources in front of us
Yes.
from the Institute of Internal Auditors and the Risk Governance Institute.
Excellent resources.
Let's dive into those core principles first.
Yeah.
They're like the bedrock, right?
Exactly. Think of them as the ethical compass for internal auditors.
Okay.
There are 10 of them, and they all work together to ensure that internal audit functions operate with integrity and purpose.
10 core principles. Where do we even begin?
Let's start with integrity.
Okay.
Like that's the cornerstone of the profession. It's
Right.
about being honest and doing the right thing even when no one is looking.
Sounds simple enough, but I imagine it can get tricky in the real world.
Absolutely. Internal auditors often deal with sensitive information and face pressure from various stakeholders.
Right.
Imagine you uncover a significant financial discrepancy,
Okay.
but your boss asks you to downplay it in your report.
Oh,
That's when your integrity is truly tested.
wow. That's a tough situation. I can see how sticking to your principles would be crucial there.
Absolutely. And that's why this principle is so heavily emphasized right from the start.
Yeah.
You even have to formally sign off on the IIA's Code of Ethics to become a certified internal auditor.
It's like taking an oath.
Exactly. And it's a commitment that internal auditors have to uphold throughout their careers.
So integrity is all about that inner compass. But what about the actual skills and expertise needed to do the job?
That's where competence and due professional care come in. Think of it as the know-how and the show-how of internal auditing.
All right.
You need to have the knowledge and skills to do the work, and you need to apply them diligently and with careful attention to detail.
So it's not just about having a knack for numbers.
Right.
It's about continuous learning and meticulous application.
Absolutely. Imagine you're auditing a complex IT system.
Okay.
You can't just rely on your basic understanding of spreadsheets.
Right.
You need to understand cybersecurity, data analytics, and the specific risks associated with that system.
Wow.
That's where competence comes in.
So that's competence.
Yes.
And I imagine due professional care is about documenting everything thoroughly
Yes.
and making sure your work is accurate and reliable.
Exactly.
Okay.
You need to be able to back up your findings with solid evidence and demonstrate that you've applied the appropriate standards and procedures.
Okay.
It's about being thorough and taking responsibility for the quality of your work.
It makes sense that those two principles go hand in hand.
They do.
But what about the pressure to please management or to downplay certain findings?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. How do internal auditors stay neutral?
That's where objectivity and independence come into play.
Okay.
It's about remaining unbiased and free from undue influence, even when things get tough.
So,
Remember that detective analogy we talked about earlier?
yes, the internal auditor as a detective searching for the truth.
Well, a good detective doesn't let personal feelings or external pressure sway their investigation, right? They
Yeah.
follow the evidence wherever it leads.
So how does an auditor maintain that kind of objectivity when they're essentially working for the company they're auditing?
That's a great question, and it's one of the biggest challenges in internal auditing.
Yeah.
The key is having strong organizational independence.
Okay.
That means the internal audit function has a direct reporting line to the audit committee of the board of directors.
So they're not reporting to the same people they're auditing,
Exactly.
which helps to avoid conflicts of interest.
Exactly. It's like having a separate branch of government that provides checks and balances.
Okay.
This structure ensures that internal auditors can voice their concerns freely without fear of reprisal.
That makes sense. It's like having that buffer to ensure they can be truly independent in their assessments.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about integrity, we've talked about competence, we've talked about objectivity.
Yeah, those are big ones.
What else?
Well, another critical principle is alignment.
Alignment.
Yeah, internal auditing isn't about being a naysayer or finding fault just for the sake of it.
Okay,
It's about working with the organization to achieve its objectives.
so they're not just pointing out problems.
Right.
They're helping to find solutions.
Absolutely. Internal auditors should have a deep understanding of the organization's goals, its industry, and the broader business environment.
Okay.
This allows them to provide insights that are relevant and add value.
It sounds like they need a good balance of skepticism and a collaborative spirit.
You hit the nail on the head. They need to be able to challenge assumptions and identify weaknesses, but also work constructively with management to find solutions.
Okay, so we've covered integrity, competence, objectivity, and alignment.
Those are four big ones.
What else is on the list of core principles?
Well, there's also the principle of being appropriately positioned and adequately resourced.
Okay.
Essentially, this means the internal audit function needs to have the right level of authority within the organization
Yeah.
and enough skilled professionals to effectively carry out its responsibilities.
You can't expect a single person to oversee a multinational corporation, right?
Exactly. The size and structure of the internal audit function should be commensurate with the size and complexity of the organization.
Right.
They need access to the right information, the right technology, and the right people to do their jobs effectively.
So there are guidelines for determining the appropriate size and structure of an internal audit department.
There are, and it often depends on factors like the industry, the organization's risk profile, and its regulatory environment.
Yeah.
For example, a financial institution might require a larger and more specialized internal audit team than a small retail business.
It makes sense that the needs would vary depending on the type of organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this principle ensures that the internal audit function is set up for success from the start.
Okay, so that's 5 core principles down.
5 down.
What's next?
Next up is the principle of demonstrating quality and continuous improvement.
Okay.
This principle is all about ensuring that the internal audit function is meeting professional standards and constantly striving to get better.
So it's like a commitment to always raising the bar.
Exactly. It's about having a culture of continuous learning and improvement within the internal audit function.
Okay.
This could involve things like professional development,
Uh-huh.
quality assurance reviews, and benchmarking against best practices.
It sounds like they're constantly evaluating their own performance and looking for ways to do things better.
That's right. They're not just checking boxes, they're challenging themselves to be more effective and impactful in their work.
So they're not just auditing the organization.
Right.
They're auditing themselves as well.
Precisely. It's about holding themselves to the same high standards that they expect of others.
I like that. Okay, we're making good progress here.
We are.
What's the next principle on our list?
Well, this one might surprise you.
Okay.
Communication.
Communication.
You might not think of communication as a core principle,
Yeah.
but it's absolutely essential for internal auditors to be effective communicators.
I can see how that would be important.
Yeah.
They need to be able to clearly explain their findings and recommendations to management and the board.
Right. Absolutely. And not just explain, but persuade.
Okay.
They need to be able to articulate the risks and implications of their findings in a way that resonates with decision makers and motivates them to take action.
So it's not just about crunching numbers and writing reports. It's about being able to tell the story behind the data and get people on board with your recommendations.
Exactly. Think of it like this.
Okay.
You could have the most brilliant audit findings in the world,
Right.
but if you can't communicate them effectively, they won't make a difference.
Communication is key in so many professions, but it sounds especially crucial in internal auditing.
It is, and it's something that internal auditors need to constantly work on and refine.
Okay, so we've got integrity, competence, objectivity, alignment, quality, and communication.
We're wrapping them up.
What's next on our list of core principles?
Next up is providing risk-based assurance.
Risk-based assurance.
This means that internal auditors don't just randomly check things.
Right.
They focus on areas where the organization is most vulnerable to risks.
So they're prioritizing their efforts based on where they can have the biggest impact.
Exactly. They're constantly assessing risks and tailoring their audits accordingly.
Okay. It makes sense to go where the biggest risks are,
Right.
rather than spreading yourself thin trying to audit everything.
Absolutely. Risk-based auditing is all about maximizing the impact and value of the internal audit function.
I like that, maximizing the impact and value.
Okay, so we're up to 7 core principles now.
7 down.
What else is there?
Well, another crucial principle is being insightful, proactive, and future-focused.
Okay.
This means that internal auditors aren't just looking at what happened in the past.
Right.
They're looking ahead and trying to anticipate potential problems and opportunities.
So they're not just reacting to events.
Right.
They're trying to get ahead of the curve.
Exactly. They're thinking strategically about the organization's future and using their insights to help management navigate a complex and ever-changing business environment.
That sounds like a pretty demanding role.
It is. It requires critical thinking.
Yeah. Strong analytical skills and the ability to connect the dots and see the bigger picture.
So not just number crunchers,
Right.
but strategic thinkers.
Exactly. And this forward-thinking approach is essential for internal audit to remain relevant and add value in today's rapidly changing world.
I like that. Okay, so that's 8, down 2 to go.
Two to go.
I'm ready for the grand finale. What are the last 2 core principles all about?
Right. Well, the ninth principle focuses on promoting organizational improvement.
Promoting organizational improvement.
This is really the overarching goal of internal auditing.
Okay.
It's about helping the organization get better, stronger, and more resilient.
So it's not just about finding faults.
Right.
It's about helping the organization learn and grow from its mistakes.
That's a great way to put it. It's about working constructively with management to improve processes, strengthen controls, and enhance overall performance.
So they're not just auditors, they're internal consultants in a way.
Exactly. There's change agents
Okay.
driving positive change and helping the organization achieve its strategic objectives.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about the final core principle?
All right, bringing it home.
What's the 10th one all about?
The 10th principle really ties all of the others together.
Okay.
It emphasizes that internal audit activity must be continually evolving to keep pace with changes to the organization and its environment.
So internal auditing can't just stay static.
Right.
It needs to adapt to the times.
Absolutely. For example, as technology rapidly evolves,
Yeah.
internal audit needs to adapt its methods and skill sets to address emerging risks in areas like cybersecurity and data analytics.
So internal audit is a dynamic and evolving field.
It is, and this principle ensures that it stays relevant and continues to add value to organizations in a world that's constantly changing.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground with these core principles.
We have.
It's clear that they lay a strong foundation for ethical and effective internal auditing.
They do. They serve as guiding principles for individual auditors and for the internal audit function as a whole. And as you can see, they're all interconnected and work together to ensure that internal auditing adds real value to the organization.
This has been a fascinating deep dive into the core principles of internal auditing. They really highlight how this field is about so much more than just checking boxes.
Absolutely.
It's about integrity, competence, objectivity, and a commitment to helping organizations thrive.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so we've explored those 10 core principles,
Right.
the ethical compass guiding every internal auditor.
Right.
Now, how do these principles actually play out in the real world?
Yeah, that's a great question.
You mentioned something called the International Professional Practices Framework, or IPPF.
The IPPF.
What exactly is that?
So the IPPF is essentially the Bible of internal auditing.
Okay.
It's the definitive guide published by the Institute of Internal Auditors outlining how to put those core principles into practice.
Okay.
Think of it as the roadmap for the entire internal audit universe.
Okay, a roadmap? A Bible? It sounds pretty comprehensive.
It is.
What does this IPPF actually cover?
It's incredibly detailed.
Yeah.
It covers everything from the mission of internal auditing to mandatory standards and even some recommended guidance
Okay.
to help auditors be as effective as possible.
So it's not just a theoretical framework, it gives practical advice too.
Absolutely. It helps auditors translate those abstract principles into concrete actions.
Okay.
For example, remember the principle of objectivity.
Yeah.
The IPPF provides guidance on how to manage potential conflicts of interest
Right.
and maintain independence from management.
Oh, so it bridges the gap between the what and the how of internal auditing.
Exactly. It's especially helpful for those studying for the Certified Internal Auditor exam.
Okay.
But it's also a valuable tool for anyone doing internal audit work in the real world.
So how is this IPPF structured? What are the key components?
So imagine it as a wheel
Okay.
with the mission of internal auditing at the very center.
Everything revolves around that core mission.
Exactly. And then the wheel is divided into two main sections.
Okay.
Mandatory guidance and recommended guidance.
Okay, so what falls under the mandatory category?
Well, the core principles we just discussed form the foundation of this section.
Right, those are non-negotiables, like the Constitution of Internal Auditing.
That's a great analogy. The mandatory guidance also includes the formal definition of internal auditing,
Okay,
clearly outlining the scope and purpose of the profession.
so it defines what it is.
It does, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And then there are the standards themselves,
Right.
which get into the nitty-gritty of how internal audits should be performed.
Okay, so the mandatory guidance sets the groundwork, defines what internal audit is,
Yes.
and its overall goals.
Sets the stage.
What about the recommended guidance?
So think of this as a bonus toolkit.
Okay.
It includes super helpful information, but isn't strictly required like the mandatory guidance.
Right.
This section provides implementation guidance
Okay.
to help auditors apply the standards in real-world situations.
For more practical advice.
It's like having a seasoned mentor whispering tips and tricks in your ear.
So it's packed with practical advice and support for auditors. What kind of things would I find in there?
You'll find all sorts of useful resources.
Yeah.
There are detailed interpretations of the standards, case studies showcasing best practices,
Uh-huh.
and even templates for things like the Internal Audit Charter.
That's amazing. It sounds like the creators of the IPPF really thought of everything.
They did. The goal is to provide a comprehensive resource that empowers internal auditors to do their best work,
Yeah.
no matter the size or complexity of the organization.
So we've got the core principles as the foundation, and then the IPPF is this all-encompassing guidebook.
Yes.
But we still haven't gotten to the actual standards yet. What are those all about?
So the standards are where the rubber meets the road. Think of them as the official rulebook for internal auditing.
So they outline specific procedures and requirements for conducting audits.
Exactly. They ensure consistency and quality across the profession, regardless of where an auditor works or what industry they're in. It's like having a universal language that all internal auditors can understand and follow.
That makes sense. It creates a level playing field and helps maintain high standards across the board.
It does.
So how are these standards organized?
They're divided into three main categories:
Okay.
attribute standards, performance standards, and implementation standards.
Okay, let's break those down. What are attribute standards all about?
So these standards focus on the qualities of internal auditors themselves,
Okay.
both as individuals and as a collective function within an organization.
So it's like defining the ideal profile of an internal auditor.
Precisely. They lay out the knowledge, skills, and attributes needed to do the job effectively.
Yeah.
Think of it like a job description for the perfect auditor, emphasizing competence, objectivity, and ethical behavior.
It makes sense to start by establishing who should be doing this work and what qualities they should possess.
It sets the bar high.
Now let's move on to the performance standards.
Yeah, okay.
What do the performance standards focus on?
This is where things get really practical. These standards outline how the actual internal audit work should be carried out step by step.
So it's a detailed guide to conducting audits from start to finish.
They cover everything from planning and scoping the audit to gathering evidence, documenting findings, and communicating results.
Okay.
It's like a roadmap for every stage of the audit process.
I can see how that would be essential for ensuring consistency and quality in the work.
It is very important, and the final category, implementation standards, dives even deeper.
Well, so it's like going from the broad strokes to the fine details.
Oh, it is.
What do these standards cover?
These standards provide more specific guidance on how to apply the attribute and performance standards in different situations.
Okay.
Think of them as helpful hints and practical tips to address specific challenges or scenarios that auditors might encounter.
So it's like having a seasoned auditor looking over your shoulder, offering advice and insights based on their experience.
That's a great way to put it. These standards ensure that the principles are applied effectively and consistently, no matter the industry or the specific audit being conducted.
This IPPF truly is comprehensive,
Yeah,
covering the who, the what, and the how of internal auditing.
it is.
It sounds like a great resource for anyone involved in the field.
It is, and it's constantly being updated and refined to keep pace with the evolving needs of organizations and the profession as a whole.
That makes sense. The business world is constantly changing, and internal audit needs to adapt to those changes to stay relevant and effective.
It does, absolutely. That's why continuous learning is so important for internal auditors.
Right.
They need to stay on top of new regulations, emerging risks, and evolving technologies.
So it's not just about mastering these standards and principles. It's about continually expanding your knowledge and skill set.
Exactly. It's a dynamic and challenging field, but also incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
You're playing a crucial role in helping organizations operate ethically, manage risks effectively, and achieve their strategic objectives.
It's fascinating how these core principles and the IPPF framework work together to create this structured, ethical, and evolving approach to internal auditing.
It is fascinating.
I'm ready to delve deeper into the specifics of those standards. Where should we start? All right, we've laid the groundwork with the core principles and the IPPF framework. Now I'm ready to dive into the specifics of those standards. Where should we start?
Well, let's start with the attribute standards, the ones that define the qualities of an internal auditor, and a great place to begin is with Standard 1000 Purpose, Authority, and Responsibility.
Standard 1000.
This standard lays out the foundation for the internal audit function within an organization.
Okay, so it's like setting the stage for the internal audit department.
Yeah,
What
exactly.
are the key elements of this standard?
So this standard emphasizes the importance of a formal internal audit charter.
The charter.
Think of it as the department's constitution.
Okay.
It outlines the purpose, authority, and responsibilities of internal audit, ensuring everyone is on the same page.
So it's not just an informal understanding.
No.
It's a clearly documented agreement.
Exactly. The charter defines the scope of internal audit activities, the reporting lines, and the level of access they have to information and resources.
That makes sense. You need that clarity
Yeah.
to ensure internal audit has the independence and authority it needs to be effective.
Absolutely. And speaking of independence, that leads us to Standard 1100,
Okay.
which covers both organizational independence and individual objectivity.
So there's a distinction between the independence of the function itself
Yes.
and the impartiality of the individual auditors.
That's right. Organizational independence means that internal audit is positioned within the organization in a way that allows it to operate freely and objectively.
Okay.
Imagine an internal audit department that reports directly to the CFO.
Okay.
Do you think they'd feel comfortable challenging the CFO's decisions or reporting potentially negative findings?
Probably not. It seems like a recipe for conflicts of interest.
Exactly. That's why this standard emphasizes reporting directly to the audit committee of the board of directors. This ensures a direct line to the top, bypassing any potential pressure or influence from management.
It creates a level of separation to allow internal audit to act as an independent watchdog for the organization.
Precisely. And then we have individual objectivity,
Okay.
which focuses on the auditors themselves remaining unbiased and impartial in their work.
So even if they're auditing a department they have personal ties to,
Right.
they have to maintain their professional distance.
Exactly. This standard calls for avoiding any conflicts of interest that could compromise an auditor's judgment.
Right.
Standard 1130 even dives into specific impairments to independence and objectivity,
Okay.
things auditors need to be aware of and avoid.
What are some examples of these impairments?
Well, a common one is having a close personal relationship with someone you're auditing.
Okay.
Imagine you're auditing the department where your best friend works. Would you be as critical and objective in your assessment?
It would be tough to separate the personal from the professional in that situation.
Exactly. Another impairment could be financial interests. If an auditor owns stock in a company, they're auditing their financial stake might cloud their judgment.
I can see how those situations could create bias even subconsciously.
And that's why this standard is so important. It helps auditors identify and manage these potential pitfalls to maintain their credibility and the integrity of their work.
It's about recognizing those blind spots and taking steps to mitigate them. Okay, so we've covered purpose, authority, and the crucial element of independence.
Yeah, big ones.
What's next on our tour of the attribute standards?
Let's move on to Standard 1200, which is all about proficiency and due professional care.
Okay.
These are the essential skills and work ethic needed for effective auditing.
It sounds like the know-how and the show-how of internal auditing.
You got it. Proficiency means having the necessary knowledge, skills, and experience to perform the work effectively.
All right.
For example, if you're auditing a complex financial process, you need a strong understanding of accounting principles and financial reporting standards.
It's not a job for amateurs.
No.
You need the right qualifications and experience to do it well.
Exactly. And then there's due professional care, right? Which is all about applying those skills with diligence and attention to detail. Think of it as the craftsmanship of auditing.
This is about being thorough and meticulous in your work, leaving no stone unturned.
Precisely, it involves careful planning,
Yes.
thorough documentation, and appropriate supervision to ensure the quality and reliability of the audit work.
It sounds like a combination of technical expertise and a meticulous work ethic.
That's a great way to put it. And Standard 1210 delves deeper into proficiency, requiring internal auditors to have a solid understanding of accounting, auditing, and other relevant areas.
Okay.
It also highlights the importance of staying up to date with changes in regulations and professional standards.
So continuous learning is a must in this field.
Absolutely. And Standard 1220 focuses on due professional care, emphasizing the importance of skepticism and professional judgment.
Okay.
It's about approaching the work with a questioning mind.
Yeah.
Critically evaluating evidence and not just taking things at face value.
So it's not just about following a checklist. It's about thinking critically and applying your professional judgment to each situation.
Exactly. And to stay sharp, Standard 1230 requires internal auditors to engage in continuous professional development.
Okay.
This could involve attending conferences, taking courses, or even pursuing additional certifications.
It's a field that demands continuous learning and growth.
It is, and that's what makes it so challenging and rewarding.
Yeah.
You're constantly expanding your knowledge and skills, and you're playing a vital role in helping organizations improve and succeed.
So we've covered purpose, authority, independence, and the crucial elements of proficiency and due professional care.
Mhm.
These attribute standards really paint a picture of what it takes to be an effective internal auditor.
They do. They set the foundation for ethical and competent practice. And as you've seen, they all tie back to those core principles we discussed earlier.
It's a fascinating framework that ensures internal audit is conducted with the highest level of professionalism and integrity. This deep dive has given me a newfound appreciation for the complexity and importance of this field.
It's been a pleasure exploring these foundations with you. Hopefully, you now have a better understanding of what internal auditing is truly about. It's more than just checking boxes and crunching numbers.
Right.
It's about upholding ethical principles, applying specialized knowledge, and working collaboratively to help organizations thrive.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, we encourage you to think about how these principles might apply to your own professional lives. Even if you're not in internal auditing, whether you're managing a team, making strategic decisions, or simply striving for excellence in your work.
Yeah.
Those core principles of integrity, competence, objectivity, and continuous improvement can serve as a valuable guide.
Well said. After all, these principles are the foundation of not just good internal auditing, but good business and ethical leadership in general.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.